So, I've been seeing these woodworking hacks all over my feed. You know the ones, these super quick 30-second videos promising to solve all your workshop problems with a simple trick. Some of them look absolutely genius, like, why didn't I think of that? But then you see others that look, let's just say, a little questionable, like using a power drill to stir your coffee, questionable. It got me thinking, how many of these are actually legit and how many are just clickbait designed to look cool on camera but are totally impractical, or even worse, dangerous? I mean, woodworking is a craft that's been around for thousands of years, and a lot of the best practices were developed for a reason, usually safety and quality. But I'm also a huge fan of innovation and finding clever ways to solve problems. So, are these viral hacks the future of woodworking? Or are they just a bunch of digital noise leading us down a path of splintered wood and frustration? I decided I had to put them to the test myself, with some real-world science and a healthy dose of skepticism. That's what this video is all about. I spent the last week in my workshop getting my hands dirty and trying out the internet's most popular tricks. Today, I tested 5 viral woodworking hacks to see which ones actually work, and which ones waste your time. We're going to separate the genius from the garbage, the helpful from the hype. By the end of this, you'll know exactly which hacks to add to your arsenal and which ones to scroll right past. Let's get to it. First up, we have what might be the most common hack I see: fixing a stripped screw hole. The internet tells me all you need to do is shove a few wooden toothpicks into the hole, snap them off, add a drop of wood glue, and then drive your screw back in like nothing ever happened. The theory is that the toothpicks and glue fill the void, creating new material for the screw threads to bite into. It sounds plausible, right? So I set up 2 scenarios, one with a piece of soft pine and another with a much harder piece of oak. I started with the pine. I drilled a pilot hole, drove a screw in, and then completely stripped it out by over-tightening it. Classic mistake. Then, I followed the hack, exactly jammed in 3 toothpicks, a little bit of wood glue, and let it sit for a few minutes. I drove the screw back in, and to my surprise, it held. I could even apply a decent amount of torque before it started to feel loose again. For a quick, non-structural fix on softwood, like reattaching a cabinet hinge that's come loose, this actually works pretty well. I'd give it a solid pass for that specific situation. But then came the oak. Hardwood is a completely different beast. It's dense, and screws need a lot more force to drive in and hold securely. I repeated the exact same process. Stripped the hole, added the toothpicks and glue, and tried to re-drive the screw. This time, the result was a complete failure. The screw just spun the toothpicks around in the hole. The soft wood of the toothpicks was no match for the dense oak. A real pro would drill out the hole completely and glue in a hardwood dowel, then re-drill the pilot hole. That gives you a solid, permanent fix that's as strong as the original wood. So this hack is a temporary, softwood-only solution. Okay, hack number 2. This one is for when you've started to strip the head of a screw and your driver bit just can't get a grip anymore. The internet claims that if you place a wide rubber band over the screw head, it will fill the gaps and give your driver bit the extra friction it needs to turn the screw. Visually, it makes sense. The rubber is supposed to press into the damaged slots and create a temporary connection. I was genuinely hopeful for this one, because we've all been there, right? One slip and you've got a cammed out screw head staring back at you. So, I grabbed a Phillips head screw that was partially stripped in a thick rubber band, just like in the videos. I laid the rubber band flat over the screw head, pressed my drill driver firmly into it, and slowly pulled the trigger. And what happened? The rubber band instantly shredded into a dozen tiny pieces. It was a complete and utter mess. The drill bit just chewed right through it without moving the screw even a millimeter. I tried it again with a different rubber band, applying more pressure, less pressure, going slower. Same result every single time. A confetti of failed rubber. Honestly, this hack seems like a total waste of time and a perfectly good rubber band. The reality is, if a screw head is that damaged, a thin piece of rubber isn't going to provide nearly enough grip to overcome the friction holding the screw in the wood. The real and much simpler solution is to just use the correct size driver bit in the first place. If it's already stripped, try a slightly larger bit or switch to a square drive bit, which can sometimes bite into the damaged corners. Or better yet, use a dedicated screw extractor. This hack is pure trash. Let's move on to something a bit more promising, using a regular kitchen sponge as a sanding block for curved surfaces. The idea here is that the soft, flexible nature of the sponge will allow the sandpaper to conform perfectly to contours and roundovers, giving you a smooth, even finish without creating flat spots. You see this one a lot for finishing table legs, moldings, or any kind of shaped edge. Unlike the others, this one felt like it had a real basis in practical application, so I was excited to try it. I grabbed a piece of wood with a nice curved edge I had shaped with a router and a standard kitchen sponge. I wrapped a piece of 220 grit sandpaper around it and started sanding. And you know what? It worked beautifully. The sponge was firm enough to provide good backing for the sandpaper, but flexible enough to hug the curve perfectly. It was way better than trying to do it by hand, which can cause uneven pressure, and much safer and more controlled than using a power sander on a delicate profile. It gave me a super smooth, consistent curve. This is one of those hacks that's so simple and effective, you wonder why it's not just standard practice. Well, it turns out for a lot of professional woodworkers and finishers, it kind of is. They might use specialized foam sanding pads, but the principle is exactly the same. The hack is really just applying a known professional technique using a common household item. So, is it a genius viral hack? Not really. Is it a genuinely useful technique for sanding curves? Absolutely. This one gets a big thumbs up, as long as you use it for its intended purpose. Don't even think about trying this on a large flat tabletop. This next hack is probably the most visually satisfying one I've seen. You take fine sawdust from the same wood you're working on, mix it with wood glue to create a paste, and use it to fill nail holes, cracks, or small gaps. The promise is a perfectly color-matched, virtually invisible patch. On camera, it looks amazing. The paste goes in, you sand it flush, and poof, the defect is gone. It's like magic. But I've always been skeptical about what happens after the camera stops rolling. I took a piece of light-colored maple, drilled a hole in it, and then collected the fine sawdust from my sander. I mixed it with some clear-drying wood glue until I had a thick paste, and carefully troweled it into the hole. After it dried, I sanded it perfectly smooth. And I have to admit, at this stage, it looked incredible. The color match was spot on, and you really had to look closely to see the patch. I thought, wow, maybe this one is legit after all. But the real test is what happens when you apply a finish. This is where the magic trick falls apart. I applied a coat of clear polyurethane to the board, and the patch immediately turned several shades darker than the surrounding wood. It stuck out like a sore thumb. See, the wood glue soaks up the finish differently than the natural wood fibers, and it seals the sawdust, preventing it from absorbing the finish in the same way. What was once an invisible patch was now a very obvious dark spot. Professionals avoid this by using pre-tinted wood fillers that are formulated to accept a finish, or for high-end work, they'll create a patch from a real piece of wood with matching grain. This hack is great for Instagram, but terrible for actual furniture. Our final hack addresses a problem every woodworker faces: a dull blade in the middle of a project. Whether it's a chisel, a plane iron, or even a utility knife, a dull edge can ruin your work. This hack suggests you can get a quick, sharp edge by simply stropping the blade on a piece of high-grit sandpaper laid on a flat surface. The idea is that the fine abrasive on the sandpaper will hone the edge, similar to a sharpening stone, just enough to get you through the job. This feels like an emergency-only kind of move, but sometimes an emergency is exactly what you've got. I decided to test this during a weekend project. I was cutting some mortises with a chisel, and after a while, it started to feel dull and was tearing the wood fibers, instead of slicing them cleanly. Instead of stopping everything to go through my full multi-stone sharpening process, I decided to try the hack. I taped a piece of 1000 grit sandpaper to my super flat granite block, added a bit of oil, and carefully dragged the chisel's bevel across it about 20 times, making sure to maintain the correct angle. The result? It actually worked. It wasn't as good as a proper sharpening, not by a long shot. A true sharpening creates a new microscopic cutting edge, while this was more like realigning and refining the existing, slightly damaged edge, a process called honing. But it was definitely sharp enough. The chisel went from tearing the wood to cutting cleanly again, allowing me to finish the mortise without a major interruption. So, this isn't a replacement for learning how to properly sharpen your tools with stones or jigs. But as a quick touch-up in a pinch to get you to the finish line, it's a surprisingly effective trick to have in your back pocket. So after testing these 5 viral hacks, what's the final verdict? We saw that the toothpick trick is a decent temporary fix for softwoods, but fails on anything tougher. The rubber band for stripped screws was a complete bust, a solution that only creates more of a mess. On the other hand, the sponge sanding hack is a genuinely useful technique that pros have been using in some form for years, and the sandpaper sharpening trick can absolutely save you in a pinch, even if it's not a long-term solution. The sawdust filler was the most deceptive. It looks perfect until you apply a finish, and then its true ugly colors come out. So are viral woodworking hacks fake? Some are trash, some are useful. The key is knowing when to use them. Many of these tricks are shortcuts that compromise quality or safety for a quick fix, while others are clever applications of sound principles. The internet is an amazing place to learn, but it's also filled with misinformation that looks really convincing in a short video. That's why critical thinking and testing things for yourself is so important in any craft. Don't just blindly follow a 30-second clip. Understand the why behind the technique. My goal with this channel is to help you do just that, to cut through the noise and give you real, tested advice you can actually use in your workshop. If you want to build your skills on a foundation of solid techniques and not just flashy tricks, make sure you subscribe to Woodworking Advisor so you don't fall for fake hacks again. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.